My pronouns are they, them, Korean, Jimin.
You transitioned to a woman and now you're back as a man. What led to that decision? Did you feel forced into it? Just give us a little bit of detail.
So my whole life I was actually very unhappy with the way I looked. So it actually started out as me wanting to change, wanting to look more perfect, more beautiful. So I kind of went on this quest since 2013 to undergo surgery to try and achieve perfection, and I've kind of realised that perfection is not attainable.
Because it's not like this whole thing didn't pay off for Ollie London. Him doing this whole K-pop facade was something which really did pay off. He was getting the numbers, the views, the attentions.
So do you think that was more sort of body dysmorphia?
But when you look at the story of Ollie London, a tragic YouTuber who decided to smoke clout and got addicted to it, they went from being a white man to now being a Korean woman.
You know, Tucker, what happened years ago when kids used to go to school, they used to idolize Superman and astronauts. Now kids are being pushed this radical ideology. They're taught to idolize weak men like Harry Styles, weak politicians like Beto O'Rourke.
People genuinely believe that somebody just wakes up, stretches, and goes, I think I'll be trans today.
We don't want biological males in our spaces because we don't feel safe, or in sports. So, you know, the fact that they use this terminology is to try and shut down arguments, because look, if you don't have a platform and let's say you're a woman and you're scared of losing your job and you say, I don't feel comfortable with a biological male in my space, you are then labelled a fascist. Immediately your life falls apart and these people cancel you.
You see trans people everywhere because you keep looking for trans people everywhere.
You know, I think it's wrong, and I think there are so many people out there trying to push these ideas on young people.
People on children is exceedingly rare. It's actually so rare that it's if to express like irreversible gender changes on children is something like 0.000493% of U.S. children aged 6 through 17 go through irreversible gender changes.
Ollie London wrote a book. Is it as bad as I expected? Is it worse than I expected? Is it okay in some places? Is it... Man, I don't even know what this book is, because honestly, I don't even know if this book is funny or not. We're going to do a deep dive into this book in just a moment. We're going to break down the writing. We're going to break down the points that Ollie tries to make in this book. We're going to discuss where he's being serious, if ever at all. Now, to be clear, I know that most of this book isn't serious in the sense that it's not honest. This book isn't funny or comedic or satirical or an outright parody of something, but it is the most painfully obvious grifter effort that I've ever seen in my life. Like, this is like Trisha Paytas levels of grifting, maybe even worse, but it's a book, so we're gonna review it today.
I've never been there, but I read about it in a book.
So for some background information on Ollie London before we dive in. Ollie London is a 33-year-old man from England whose career is a weird mix of social media influencer, fashion influencer, failed K-pop star, former trans woman, former white to Korean transracial person, pro-LGBTQ activist, anti-LGBTQ activist, plastic surgery addict, born-again Christian, anti-woke right-wing crusader, and now, I guess, author. Basically, Ollie London is a walking, talking TLC show. I shouldn't put that thought out into the universe because it's only going to be a matter of time before he actually gets his own TLC show at this point. He's already been on Dr. Phil, on Piers Morgan, on Tucker Carlson, and all the other shows that bored boomers enjoy watching for the schadenfreude. And maybe that's what he's going for. By being as weird and provocative as he can, by gaining attention at all costs, Ollie might be loved sometimes, he might be hated other times, but he's never forgotten.
That's why no one will remember your name.
The true formula for any aspiring celebrity or reality TV star. According to Robert Greene's well-known self-help book targeted at CEOs and sociopaths called 48 Laws of Power, Law 6 tells us that we must all court any type of attention at all costs. As Greene writes, everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd then, or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous at all cost. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. Draw attention to yourself by creating an unforgettable, even controversial image, court scandal. Do anything to make yourself seem larger than life and shine more brightly than those around you. Make no distinction between kinds of attention. Notoriety of any sort will bring you power. Better to be slandered and attacked than ignored. And while 48 Laws of Power as a book mostly details ways to exploit other people for your own personal gain, on some level, if you as the reader have no personal conscience or moral compass whatsoever, yeah, the information in it can work. These things can be true. And they certainly have worked for Ollie London, a mediocre writer who somehow gained a book deal with Skyhorse Publishing, a company famous for publishing Woody Allen's memoir, a series of Minecraft-themed books for middle schoolers, and Robert F. Kennedy's entire anti-vax manifesto. Ollie's book has received positive reviews from a variety of right-wing B-list talking heads and government figures, including a quote from Dr. Phil saying, "Ollie underwent 5 facial surgeries in one day," which is really not a review of the book. Here's a review of the book from best-selling author Savvy Writes Books. Ollie London's book is one of the books of all time. Ollie London is a human who lives on Earth. So, what is this book about? It's about this. How one man struggles with self-identity and detransition lays challenge to the very foundation of the gender ideology movement. While documenting his own personal identity struggles with gender and self-identity, British K-pop singer Ollie London explores the root cause of the issue of trans ideology and gender identity, tackling the pressures of social media, the education system, media, and other factors that are pushing a growing number of young people into transitioning. He takes a close look at real-world examples and examines laws, research, and data to help lift the lid on the multi-billion-dollar gender-affirming care industry. Now, if that premise sounds ridiculous, a little bit offensive, and like an obvious cash grab to make money from gullible anti-trans activists who will do anything to blame the trans agenda for all their problems, then you'd be right. So let's dive deep into Ollie London's first and hopefully last ever book, Gender Madness.
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effing.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.
What's up, my fellow small business supporters? I'm Savvy. Welcome back to Savvy Writes Books, the channel where we talk about books and business, where today I am back with another book review for you guys. But if you're new here, please don't forget to click the subscribe button because I put out new videos every week reviewing books, doing business commentary, doing deep dives into topics about those things, and all of that, so you won't want to miss it. Before we get too deep into the topic, first we need to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. Look up on the screen, that's where my Patreon supporters' names are. Patreon supporters who contribute $5 a month and up are also linked in the description below, so go ahead and check them out and give them some support as well. And if you're interested in weekly blog posts, getting a behind the scenes look at my life as a business owner, frequent Patreon exclusive live streams where we kind of script these videos, go behind the scenes of things, react to trending topics and that kind of stuff, if any of that interests you, go ahead and check out my Patreon in the description below. And while we're at the topic of promoting things, let's have a thank you to today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Magic Spoon, which has been my favorite cereal for more than a year and a half due to its variety of flavor options and substantial protein content. Especially since I've begun my muscle mommy workout journey back at the end of 2021, I've been more conscious of the amount of protein I get, and I've been seeking ways to add more protein into each meal. Having a high protein cereal for breakfast, especially with some milk added, has been a great way for me to enjoy an easy breakfast that also fuels me up. Magic Spoon cereals include 13 to 14 grams of protein per 1 cup serving, which also includes 4 to 5 net grams of carbs and about 140 calories per serving. My long-standing favorite flavor of Magic Spoon has been their cinnamon roll flavor, but during the past couple months, I've also come to love some of their newer flavors like birthday cake. Magic Spoon also offers a variety of other delicious flavors like cocoa, fruity, peanut butter, and maple waffle. To check out some of these awesome flavors and more, head to the link in my description below where you can build a variety box choosing from any of these flavors, plus other flavors like frosted and blueberry muffin. If you use the code SAVVY at checkout, you can get $5 off of your first order of Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon cereal comes backed with a 100% happiness guarantee, so if for any reason you're not satisfied with your purchase, you can get your money refunded. So why not give it a try? To start shopping for some awesome new cereal, click the link in my description below or go to magicspoon.com/savvy or scan the QR code on the screen right now. Don't forget to use my code SAVVY for $5 off on your order at checkout. Magic Spoon ships to the US, the UK, and to Canada. I really hope you enjoy this cereal as much as I've been. Thank you to Magic Spoon for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to our main topic. You guys like this sweatshirt? This just released with my collection for August for the Hipster Unicorn Fashion, which is my merch site. I just released this with my new unicorn art. I think it's so cute. And we're getting beanies releasing in this collection on September 14th. Check it out, linked in the description below. Gender Madness by Ollie London was published on August 15th, 2023 by Sky Horse Publishing. In contrast to most influencer books and most political commentator books for that matter, this book was not published by one of the big 5 publishing companies. Sky Horse Publishing is, however, sort of infamous in its own right. On September 17th, 2020, Vanity Fair published an article entitled Sky Horse Publishing's House of Horrors, which details the company's not only subpar literary work, but also horrifyingly toxic work environments for employees. As the article reports, the Manhattan-based publishing house, which bills itself as one of the fastest-growing independent publishers in the United States, is far from a household name, but you've probably heard of its most noteworthy books, Alan's memoir, Apropos of Nothing, or the Skyhorse edition of the Mueller Report, or Roger Stone's 2019 reprint, The Myth of Russian Collusion, the inside story of how Donald Trump really won, rushed out just days before Stone was slapped with a gag order while on trial for obstruction, witness tampering, and false statements, and found guilty on all counts before Trump commuted his sentence. In recent months, Skyhorse's Plague of Corruption, co-written by the discredited former researcher Dr. Judy Mikovits, became a bestseller following her appearance in the coronavirus conspiracy theory video Plandemic, a portion of which circulated widely online before Facebook and YouTube removed it for violating anti-misinformation guidelines. When I ask how Tony Lyons, who's the founder of the company, ensures factual accuracy in the book Skyhorse publishes, he says, "That's always a tough question. Generally, the idea is that we want a book to make a strong argument." In June 2017, 2 Asian American employees reported to management that Skyhorse author Oliver Stone made racist and sexual remarks to them at a party Lyons hosted at his own Upper West Side apartment. In October of that year, Playboy model Carrie Stevens accused Stone of groping her at a party when she was 22, and Patricia Arquette described an uncomfortable professional encounter. The 2 employees, both publicists, had been assigned to work with Stone before and during the party as he signed the materials for his book, The Putin Interviews. In a recording of the meeting among the 2 employees, Lyons and Skyhorse controller Ann Choi on the Monday following the party, the employees, audibly emotional, described Stone repeatedly calling one of them Wing, not her name, joking that one of the women had a nighttime job as a prostitute, and making other references to Asian women and prostitution, suggesting that one of the publicists give him a massage and specifically requesting that an Asian girl help him out. When contacted by Vanity Fair, both publicists stood by these characterizations of the event. Plus, there is so much more in that article detailing how awful Skyhorse Publishing is. I will link it in the description below. Anyway, that's the company we're dealing with. That's the company who published Ollie London's book. Now, I'm not saying by any means that Ollie's publisher is a direct reflection on the quality of his work. After all, as I've said before, I've used Kindle Unlimited to publish tons of rapid release romances under pen names, yet Amazon, who owns Kindle, is a huge corporation that's engaged in tons of human rights violations at its companies and within its factories, and I think a lot of writers are constantly facing this struggle every day about how to ethically publish their work, or even if there is such a way to do so. So that's all to say that just because Ollie London worked with Skyhorse Publishing, that alone doesn't make the book awful. The content of the book is what makes the book awful, so let's dive into that next. Like any good grifter pretending to care about literature, Ollie London starts the book with a 1984 reference. This is the place where I started to wonder if the book was actually just a troll effort. Like, yes, I think he does want the right-wingers that he's pandering to take this book seriously, but like, also, is he trolling? Is he putting in little Easter eggs for people who don't agree with this side of the issue to laugh at? Or is he not smart enough for that? Is he just a really lazy writer? You decide. This is from the first page of the preface in the book. Common sense is no longer common. In his dystopian novel 1984, acclaimed English novelist George Orwell said that the heresy of heresies was common sense, something that we can all agree seems an accurate prediction for where modern society was headed. We now live in that very society that Orwell warned us about, a dystopian world where the very notion of truth is rejected, much like the Ministry of Truth in Orwell's novel, a propaganda ministry responsible for the total opposition of truth in order to mold the minds of the masses to persuade them to reject it. So a couple things here. First of all, what is common sense? Who decides what is common sense? Is it determined by what the commoners, the common majority of people believe?
Come and see the violence inherent in the system! Help! Help! I'm being repressed!
Or are we just supposed to all hold the same beliefs indefinitely because once something is described as common sense, it's set in stone and that must be common sense for life?
What are the rules?
Lines like this one really get me, where he says, George Orwell said that the heresy of heresies was common sense, something we can all agree seems to be an accurate prediction for where modern society was headed. Who is we all? Who is the all that can agree here? Once again, it's either lazy writing, or it's intentionally inflammatory, or maybe both. Finally, I think it's important that we look at how Ollie defines propaganda from the start of the book. He says, our minds are fed ideas from the day we are born through films, television, news broadcasts, music, celebrities, pop culture, schools, textbooks, and of course, the modern phenomenon of social media. We are indoctrinated into believing notions that at one point in time would have seemed absurd to us, yet now have become normalized and rationalized as an accepted part of our belief system. So is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this a neutral thing? There's no value judgment given to the idea that as humans we perceive things. We all live in a society. I'm not sure what he's going for here. Considering the audience that Ollie wants to pander to, it seems that he's trying to say it's bad that we're all indoctrinated by social media and schools and TV and whatever else, because of course woke leftists run the media and they're brainwashing our kids. And that's a point he does try to emphasize later in the book when he claims that social media is encouraging the trans epidemic or whatever. But what does he mean here? Would the world be better if we didn't have any of these things? If from birth we all just locked ourselves into dark closets with no sensory input whatsoever? We all just live our entire lives in sensory deprivation chambers so that we can never be indoctrinated by anything? Of course humans are going to share their ideas and their perspectives with one another. That's not propaganda or indoctrination by default. And Ollie, because he's not a very good writer, never bothers to explore what makes a piece of media propaganda versus what makes it entertainment versus what makes it genuine information. After the preface, we get to the introduction of the book, which is called Faux Facade. What if you were given one chance in life to be reborn? To reinvent and mold yourself into an image of your choosing? Would you do it? Would you alter your entire image and identity to change the essence of who you are if it gave you the chance to achieve lasting happiness? Palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti. That feels like what we're going into here. Some of you may jump at the chance if it meant you could be eternally happy, while others may say that we are all created in God's image and should be happy with the way he made us. Before I found faith turned my life around and underwent my subsequent detransition, I had been convinced that it was possible to reinvent and alter oneself beyond recognition in a relentless and reckless quest for fulfillment and lasting happiness. I didn't see it at the time. I didn't see that everything I had done to myself in the name of changing my identity was only part of a self-destructive route I had been venturing down at a dangerous speed. I tried to conceal my unhappiness by creating a faux facade, a man-made mask courtesy of plastic surgeons to try and veil my own insecurities, to hide my struggles and disguise the traumas that had been purposely repressed inside of me. So a lot of shit's weird in here, like, where he sets up this false dichotomy, like, some of you might jump at the chance to alter your entire body and get double-digit numbers of plastic surgeries and go through constant pain, but others of you might just accept that you're created in God's image. Very nice false dichotomy there. I don't necessarily think I was created in God's image. I have had one plastic surgery. I'm bleaching my hair and wearing lots of makeup, and these eyelashes are absolutely fake. But I also do not plan to continue to give myself tons of plastic surgery, nor do I think I was made in God's image. So it's just interesting how he sets it up as if those are the two genders, made in God's image or 32 plastic surgeries by the time you're 30 years old. This is also where it's pretty clear that Ollie is talking about plastic surgery addiction. This has nothing to do with the LGBTQ community or the concept of being transgender. This is a man's struggle with plastic surgery addiction, which is a completely separate issue that we'll delve into more in a minute. On page 2 of this book, we really start to delve into Ollie's history with plastic surgery addiction. So in his introduction, Ollie takes us through the terrifying journey of one of his most painful surgeries, one where he got surgery for his gynecomastia, meaning removal of male breast tissue, along with a nose job and a few other facial surgeries, all at once in a shady, uncredited hospital in Armenia. He even says that the hospital did not have the same strict rules and guidelines and didn't have the latest up-to-date equipment and technology. But I had been told by countless doctors in London that they would not operate on me, so I knew I had no other choice but to go far away to a place where doctors would say yes to my every demand and would not even question my motives or my dire state of mental health. One of the foundational premises of this book is that Ollie thinks it's too easy for young people to gain access to gender-affirming surgeries, and that they could end up making horrible, irreversible changes to their bodies just as he did. But his point is contradicted on this very page. Ollie outright said that he couldn't get whatever surgeries he wanted. wanted, and that he had to travel to various other countries to find doctors who could do these surgeries under the table. In England, doctors tried to stop Ollie from getting tons of surgeries at once and wanted him to see a psychologist before making these commitments, but he didn't want that. And he, as a 28-year-old grown adult at this point, chose to go to various other countries, including Armenia, Thailand, South Korea, and Turkey, to get his 32 procedures and counting completed. So this made me wonder, what is Ollie's goal here? As his own story example shows, it's not that easy to get plastic surgery wherever you want, whenever you want it, even as an adult, at least not in England or in the US, and at least not from reputable accredited doctors. Is he trying to claim that all surgeries of any kind should be outlawed everywhere in the entire world by some kind of universal earth governing body just to stop plastic surgery addicts like himself from taking advantage of it? That's like saying that we need to destroy all cars because some people get into car accidents, or that we need to get rid of all fire because some people might set themselves on fire for fun. It doesn't make any sense. On the next page, page 3, he even drives home just how difficult it was for him to get these surgeries. He says, "I had grown desperate in my search for a doctor who would perform multiple procedures on me in one day." Then later on the same page, he says, "I could not find any accreditation for the doctor or clinic during my searches across the internet and barely found any reviews from former patients, but I didn't care." This is a you problem. I honestly think that Ollie just really wanted to write a memoir about his own struggles with overcoming plastic surgery addiction, which honestly could have been an interesting book to read. He could have spent this entire book reflecting on his own thought processes and examining what led him into this terrible spiral of body dysmorphia and what he's doing to recover. But because Ollie is a grifter who wants to make money off of his new anti-trans audience, he has to pretend that this is all part of the trans industry somehow, even if his own stories actually show evidence to the contrary. Some of the writing in this book is also really weird. Like on page 7, when Ollie says, "I screamed in pain and tears flooded down my eyes." They flooded down your eyes? How long are your eyes? Or did tears flood your eyes? Or did tears maybe run down your face? Excellent editing, Skyhorse Publishing. That's why we love traditional publishing companies. They always have great proofreading, great editing, great quality control of literature. Throughout this entire first section of the book, Ollie then delves into the ways that his body dysmorphia started to form as he was growing up. A lot of it was coming from the bullying he was receiving over his gynecomastia, over his bad skin, and he also discusses how, due to his father having been abusive, Ollie preferred to look up to his mother as a role model and in turn ended up developing a lot of feminine characteristics. Now, if this were simply Ollie's honest memoir, this could lead into a really interesting discussion about the harms of bullying. It could maybe even have a pro-transgender message in discussing how we shouldn't impose gender roles too hard on kids, because allowing a young boy to express his feminine side can be a good thing if he has his mom as the role model, whether or not that kid is trans or LGBTQ at all. In general, the majority of the LGBTQ community is just trying to open up more freedom for everyone to engage in whatever behaviors they want, regardless of those behaviors having any historical ties to masculinity or femininity. But instead, because Ollie is a right-wing grifter, he talks about how the bullying and feminine traits made him falsely believe that he was a trans woman and that this is what's happening to kids everywhere without really providing much evidence to this actually happening. On page 39, I even wrote in my notes, if LGBTQ people were accepted and we didn't judge based on gender, Ollie wouldn't have been bullied. We should all be on the same side. Later on this page, Ollie tries and fails to loosely tie this into trans activism somehow. He says, "In today's modern society, children are equally impressionable, and if a classmate or even a teacher tells a boy he is too feminine or too like a girl, the child can be made to believe they were born in the wrong body, encouraged to develop gender dysphoria, or encouraged to change their gender. My own teenage years taught me that if someone tells you something too many times, you generally believe it. I was told each day I was worthless, ugly, too feminine, and a girl, so I started to believe their every word and eventually acted upon it later in my life." This book doesn't show any examples of teachers, classmates, or doctors encouraging kids to be trans. All it says is that this could happen, theoretically, in some alternate universe, even though that didn't happen to Ollie, and it doesn't really happen to anyone else in this book either. Also, keep in mind that some people do just have gender dysphoria, and Ollie acknowledges that in this book. He acknowledges that trans people do exist throughout his interviews and throughout this book itself. He knows that gender dysphoria is real, and that for some people, transitioning is actually the best answer, which is what makes it all the more confusing that he's writing a book about how it's not the answer. Again, it's a grift. On page 41, Ollie attempts to bring in some actual evidence, but he does so very poorly, drawing conclusions that make little sense, but could be enough to convince a casual reader who's already on his side and just looking for confirmation bias. He says, in 2 of the leading studies into the factors leading to a gender dysphoria diagnosis in Finland and in the UK, half the adolescents with gender dysphoria reported significant bullying and periods of social isolation during childhood prior to questioning their gender. The Finnish study found 45% of children had experienced a history of extreme bullying, low self-esteem, and as a result, depression. In a separate Canadian study, children who had been bullied were also far more likely to develop gender identity issues than children who had not reported any bullying in childhood and as adolescents. Here, Ollie is trying to claim that because he was bullied as a child and then later wrongfully transitioned as an adult, that means that every trans kid who is bullied must be transitioning because of the bullying. We've called this out in so many books before, but this is a fallacy. Correlation does not equal causation. I can absolutely believe that 45% of trans kids experience extreme bullying. In fact, I can believe that a significant portion of all kids experience bullying. I've taught middle school before. I know how obnoxious that age group can be. What Ollie fails to do here is show that the bullying in any way caused these kids to transition. It's just as likely, if not more, that the students were bullied because they were trans, not the other way around. Or maybe some of those trans kids were bullied for other unrelated reasons and just also happen to be trans. Basically, these statistics are useless. They don't tell a complete story. As a kid, I was also bullied because I was too masculine as a girl, yet I'm not trans. So there's a point to the contrary. On page 42, Ollie just straight up admits that he's addicted to plastic surgery and has been since he was 23 years old. According to Addiction Center, plastic surgery addiction can be tied to body dysmorphic disorder. As the site explains, plastic surgery addiction is a behavioral disorder which causes a person to want to constantly change their appearance by undergoing plastic surgery. The disorder may cause someone to spend thousands of dollars on multiple operations, all of which may not ultimately make them any happier. Throughout the country, there are rehabilitation facilities which offer therapy and support for recovery from plastic surgery addiction. In particular, cognitive behavioral therapy may help people in recovery better understand how body dysmorphic disorder causes their addiction and overcome the obsessive feelings of low self-esteem which accompany the disorder. Throughout the book, Ollie repeatedly tells us that he never bothered to go to therapy. He never saw a psychiatrist or a therapist at all. He only saw surgeons. In reality, Ollie was likely suffering from an addiction, as he himself admits in the book. What he neglects to mention is that most trans people don't have plastic surgery addictions. The majority of trans people report being significantly happier after transition, and they remain that way for life. Meanwhile, Ollie would experience a rush of happiness after each surgery he got, much like the high one gets from a drug, and then when that high faded, he would seek out another surgery. Many trans people go through a series of medical treatments, including hormone therapy, top and bottom surgery, occasionally facial surgery as well, but after those surgeries are done, most trans people never seek any additional surgeries. The transition has an end point. Sure, everyone's going to continue to evolve as a person and change their appearance here and there throughout their life. That goes for trans people and cis people alike. But when it comes to gender transition surgeries, unless something goes horribly wrong, that's usually kind of one and done. That's why you see most trans people just living their lives with their new identities, not constantly changing them all the time like Ollie does. Ollie was dealing with something different entirely, so it's no wonder that the same treatment didn't work. And this is pretty consistent with people who aren't even trans but do still experience some type of dysphoria. I've had one plastic surgery in my life, and that was breast reduction, and I haven't felt the desire to have any more plastic surgery since then. Dysphoria is a specific disorder separate from body dysmorphia, and we're going to delve into those differences in just a bit because Ollie confuses them a lot throughout this book. On page 43, Ollie shows us further that his experience is entirely something different from what most trans people go through, once again, because he didn't actually have gender dysphoria, he had a plastic surgery addiction. He says, A lot of difficult traumas overlapped for me to process, and I was never able to fully process them, so I ended up down a dark and destructive path, resulting in 32 plastic surgeries, consisting of 6 nose surgeries, chest reduction, facial feminization, 3 eye surgeries, 3 facelifts, and having my bones shaved down and completely restructured. 32 plastic surgeries, that's an addiction. As UVA Health reports, gender reassignment or confirmation surgery is more common in transgender men, 42 to 52%, than transgender women, 28%. Top surgery, which is chest gender confirmation surgery, is performed approximately twice as often as bottom genital surgery. In studies that assess transgender men and women as an aggregate, top surgery accounts for 8 to 25%, and bottom surgery accounts for 4 to 13%. So most trans people are getting between 0 and 2 surgeries. Most are getting 1 surgery, and a lot of trans people aren't getting any surgeries and are instead using hormone therapies or other similar methods to achieve their desired results. None of them are getting 30 plus plastic surgeries. That is a different problem entirely.
37. My girlfriend sucked 37 dicks.
In a row?
And to conflate them as if this is a common experience is so incredibly inaccurate. On page 50, we get some more weird writing when Ollie talks about his first job. He says, he's talking about like his first awful day at work when he was working at a restaurant, and he says, after my first disastrous day, I felt humiliated, stupid, and convinced myself that I never wanted to be a waiter again, yet at my next shift at work, I had to be the waiter again, despite telling my manager that I wanted to remain in the kitchen. It happened again the following day, and yet again, until suddenly my main job was to be this customer-facing person, to have to make eye contact and speak with actual people. It was daunting, and I thought it soul-destroying. So there's just like weird parallelism here where he says like, I felt humiliated, stupid, and convinced myself that I never wanted to be a waiter. Like, why doesn't he say like, I felt humiliated and stupid and convinced myself? Because if he's trying to say I felt these ways and I convinced myself, and those are the two like separate verb phrases that he's going for, he would want to say humiliated and stupid because those are the 2 items in the list. But if he's saying he felt humiliated, he felt stupid, and he felt convinced of not wanting to be a waiter anymore, and those are the 3 items in the list, that he would restructure that to say I felt humiliated, stupid, and convinced that I never wanted to be a waiter anymore. So basically just the parallelism in the sentence is off. It's just another example of this book not having very good editing. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of this book is really just Ollie's memoir, talking about his journey of dealing with body dysmorphia and plastic surgery addiction, and his ultimate journey to learning to love himself as he is. But that alone wasn't gonna sell. That's why throughout this book we get a lot of weird right-wing rhetoric just awkwardly shoehorned into each passage when it really feels like an afterthought. So take page 59, for example. Ollie's talking about going to university, and in the middle of talking about all the cool new people he's meeting, he drops this out of nowhere. Back when I studied in 2009, it was a time of free speech and the ability to speak with people with different opinions without fear of retaliation. Before the advent of wokeism and cancel culture, universities were a place of open dialogue, healthy debate, and an emphasis on discussing both sides of an argument to encourage students to form their own opinions. In English literature class, we would debate each book, trying to decide what the author's intentions were and what message they were trying to convey. So first of all, how is this any different than what school is like now? In 2019, 10 years after this, I was in grad school where I was taking classes studying to become a literature teacher for 2-year college programs, and in my lesson plans that I made, I absolutely left room for students to debate each book, to share their own opinions and personal connections to each piece, to engage with one another in thoughtful dialogue, all of that. I never censored anyone, and this was in 2019, which was just 4 years ago. I'm only 3 years younger than Ollie, but I graduated from university in 2015, and I was always debating ideas with everyone there. I think he's just making this up.
She doesn't even go here.
It's this common right-wing talking point about how universities are run by the woke leftists and that conservatives are silenced in colleges that want to brainwash our young people, which is so weird and ironic because college is an extremely expensive, often privatized and capitalist institution. It's not the structure that most far leftists would even prefer. On top of that, Ollie's point about free speech rings hollow when free speech in the US versus in the UK, where Ollie's from, versus South Korea, where he studied and spent a lot of his career, free speech is wildly different in terms of how it's conceptualized and enforced in all of these places to begin with. Basically, this entire section feels like an editor wrote it in there last minute to make sure that the book had enough pandering to a conservative audience. Throughout the book, Ollie often plays into stereotypes of what he thinks conservatives think that liberals think of them. That doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to show you a couple examples and you'll see what I mean. This is one of the rhetorical devices that makes me think Ollie is probably just trolling. So let's start by looking at page 68. Ollie has decided to study in Ethiopia for a bit, where he's going to work on providing resources to low-income kids. He stays with a local family while he's there, and on his first night there, the mother in this family cooks him this wonderful, big, home-cooked Ethiopian meal. Now, we've all heard the stereotype before about white people can't handle spice, British people like bland, boring food, non-white people cook more flavorful dishes than white people do, etc., all those things. Now, I personally love Ethiopian food. My neighborhood has a few fantastic Ethiopian restaurants in it, but because Ollie is a troll, he has to play into the white people hate spice thing. He says, another plate of boiled potatoes, one with yellow lentils and with chopped greens and some goat's cheese in a bowl on the side. I'd never seen food like this before, and I wish I could have had a full English breakfast instead. Baked beans, toast, hash browns, and mushrooms. I'm sorry, you're telling me you genuinely wanted a boring-ass English breakfast of beans on toast when you were being offered a giant home-cooked, authentic Ethiopian meal? Now, everyone has their own personal tastes. I'm not saying that Ollie has to like Ethiopian food or that beans on toast are boring, even though they are. Yes, I am saying that. That's so fucking boring. British people, what is wrong with you? But I do think that Ollie is leaning into the trope. Maybe as a bit, I'm not sure. I think it might be because he brings it back later. It comes back on page 84 when Ollie moves to South Korea to teach English and is suddenly shocked at how weird all the Asian food is. It was my first time trying Korean cuisine, and I hoped my last, for it was far different from the English food I was used to. But I thought to myself, afterward, that I was in this new country and I needed to get used to it. Appreciating the food would be an important part of immersing myself into Korean culture, though I wish I could have had a baked potato with cheese and beans and a salad instead, or even a peanut butter sandwich. So Ollie, who claims to be obsessed with Korean culture and who doesn't appropriate it, he appreciates it. He claims to love and appreciate and respect Korean culture, but he thinks their food is too weird and that he'd rather have beans on toast and baked potatoes and salad. Come on, this has to be like a weird bit that he's doing, right? Like, I can't see it any other way. Then on page 90, he's done talking about food, but he does yet another weird, I'm gonna act like a parody of what conservatives think that the leftists think that white people stereotypes are thing. So he's talking about finding all these K-pop bands he liked, watching Korean dramas on TV, and how much he loves discovering all the brilliant things that Korea has to offer. He says, I was inspired and allured by this newfound world. I felt like Christopher Columbus prior to his cancellation by woke culture on his first voyage to America and all the amazing discoveries he made, a new world filled with promise and hope, with wonderment and treasures beyond imagination. Like, come on, that's kind of funny, right? Like, that's so ridiculous, it's funny. I think this line right here is what sealed it for me. This entire book is a troll effort, and Ollie is a lifelong troll who is firmly committed to this act for life. On page 96, he talks about how he liked South Korean culture and K-pop because it celebrated men with feminine features. He says, the male K-pop idols often presented as feminine, with soft facial features and feminine mannerisms, something that I strongly identified with. In the world of K-pop and K-drama, while the men are effeminate, soft-spoken, elegant, and in touch with their feminine side, they are still considered men. Not like what we see in predominantly Western countries, non-binary or trans people. They didn't have pronouns like they, them, and they didn't call themselves women like we see so frequently now in the United States and European countries. Korea, like many other Asian countries, had a clear gender definitions for men and women as a collective. Society were perfectly okay with some men being more feminine and some women being more masculine, yet they did not encourage or promote the idea that these effeminate men or masculine women should transition. So Ollie's entire argument here is that in Korea, men can be feminine and women can be masculine, and it's a beautiful gender role-free utopia, and no one transitions because the world is better that way. Except this isn't true, because just a few pages earlier, Ollie talks about how in South Korea, he made friends with a trans woman. This woman is the first trans person Ollie's ever met, and she's Korean. He even admits this later on this very page when he says, although I had met a trans person in Korea, I was still unfamiliar with the idea of transitioning and swapping genders. So which is it? On page 119, Ollie gets to the heart of the matter, which is where he confuses gender dysphoria with body dysmorphia and makes an entire argument based on a misunderstanding of the differences between these two conditions. He says, many people with body dysmorphia, like myself, don't realize that the concealment and even having surgery on the area to try and remove the problem never actually solves the problem itself, because it means the person dedicates even more time to that area they dislike and always have reminders about their perceived flaw. There is no miracle cure for BDD, and plastic surgery can even make the obsession worse, as my story demonstrates. Gender dysphoria goes hand in hand with body dysmorphia because it involves a state of severe distress, despondency, feeling unhappy with your body, and having feelings of low self-esteem based on feeling trapped in the wrong gender identity. There are often many parallels, including spending long periods of time looking in the mirror and trying to conceal the area areas of the body that remind a person of their biological sex, such as a girl who feels they should be boys wearing chest binders to conceal their breasts. So he's right that these two diagnoses have a few similarities. Those similarities include feeling very uncomfortable with certain parts of your body and wanting to change them. But two things having a couple similar symptoms doesn't mean those two things are to be treated medically exactly the same. Getting a concussion and having brain cancer will both give you a headache, but that doesn't mean that the solution to both of them is to take a handful of ibuprofen. Ollie maybe would have known this if he'd bothered to see a single therapist before flying all over the world to get surgeries, but he didn't do that. If you don't know the difference between dysmorphia and dysphoria, I'll break it down real quick. This is going to be oversimplified, but I'm not a doctor. This is just based on my personal experiences. So dysmorphia refers to an obsession over a perceived flaw, while dysphoria refers to a deep discomfort with something that is actually there. Here's an example. A common symptom or effect of body dysmorphia can be developing an ED. A lot of people look at their body and say, I'm too fat, I want to be thinner, but because of their dysmorphia, making their brain completely incapable of accurately perceiving their own body, no matter how thin they get, they won't notice that they're thin yet, they won't be able to understand that they're thin yet, because the dysmorphia is causing a disconnect between the input that their eyes are taking in and the way their brain is processing that image. So they're still going to see themselves fat. This was my experience back when I had an ED about 14 years ago. I was very underweight. I had like bones peeking out of my skin. I had poor blood circulation. I had purple lips. I had doctors telling me to gain weight, but I just couldn't see it. Because of that, the person with body dysmorphia will likely continue to keep pursuing the fixing of this flaw because they still see it there no matter how hard they try to get rid of it. Meaning that for someone with an ED, for example, unless the mental health component is fixed, they will just try to continue starving themselves until death. Or for someone like Ollie, who continued to see issues with his nose and his face that weren't actually there, he continues to seek out surgery after surgery without ever seeing the issue as truly fixed because he actually can't perceive himself correctly. Now, dysphoria also causes discomfort in your body, but the difference is that you're uncomfortable, but you are perceiving yourself accurately. So for example, a trans woman may have dysphoria over the fact that she has a penis. She knows she has a penis. She's aware that it's there. She can visually and mentally perceive it, but she doesn't want it there, but she knows it is there. As a result, when she gets the surgery to remove it, the dysphoria is resolved because she no longer has a penis and she's capable of accurately perceiving herself and knowing that she no longer has it. So when I had dysphoria over my chest, even as a cisgender woman, I was distressed because my boobies were extremely large.
If your knockers are just too damn big.
And that was an accurate perception. They actually accurately were extremely large. So when I got breast reduction surgery, that fixed the dysphoria. I accurately perceive my body now. I am a roughly medium-sized person, and that's true. I've felt no other desire since then for any other physical changes to my body. This is completely different from my experience when I had body dysmorphia, in which my perception of my body was false and could never be resolved. I hope that makes sense. At the end of the day, different diagnoses come with different medical treatments. Ollie did not have gender dysphoria, he had body dysmorphia. Or maybe in the case of his gynecomastia, maybe that was having dysphoria and he got that breast tissue removed, and then nowhere in the book does he ever express regret for getting his breast tissue removed. So maybe that was an actual example of dysphoria in his life. I don't know, I'm not his doctor.
Fine, do whatever you like. What would I know? I'm just a doctor.
But meanwhile, his issues with his nose and his facial shape, those were issues that he perceived in his mind rather than them being the result of anything real. Because of that, his mind still has an inaccurate perception of who he is, even after he had 30 different surgeries. On page 141, he doubles down on this point, continuing to get the distinction wrong. He says, I felt trapped with the way I looked and trapped in the wrong body, just like someone who feels they are trapped in the wrong gender. How is what I felt at the time any different from people who transition their gender? I knew deep down it wasn't any different. It was essentially the same, and I thought what I was doing was even less extreme than someone who had a full sex change. After all, both changing gender and changing identity or the way one looks involved plastic surgery, so what was the actual difference? The difference is that one of those things has decades of results showing it to be an accurate treatment for dysphoria, while plastic surgery for body dysmorphia alone has no evidence of working long-term. That's the difference. Now, I want to be clear. I am an advocate for bodily autonomy in all of its forms in all cases. Ollie has the right, as an individual human, to get as many plastic surgeries as he wants. He is an adult. He can do literally whatever he wants to his own body. But it's not fair for him to say, well, I'm not satisfied with these results, so that means that trans people aren't allowed to be satisfied with these results either. Ollie has the right to do whatever he wants to his own body, but it's extremely stupid of him to go all surprised Pikachu when he gets treatment for the wrong disorder and then gets mad that that treatment didn't work. Like I said, you might get a headache from your brain cancer, but if you try to treat it with painkillers, you're gonna have a bad time. On page 161, Ollie details the beginning of his gender transition, the brief period of time that he lives as a transgender woman. He says, "Until I realized I still felt something was missing. I still didn't feel like me. The incredible feeling I had since transitioning was starting to fade. The serotonin hit was diminishing and I was starting to want more. The surgery fixed time limit had expired, just like every other time, and I started to think about moving on to changing my body." So, once again, this is plastic surgery addiction. This is not gender dysphoria. Ollie was enjoying the start to his transition because he enjoyed the high he got from plastic surgery. This is such an atypical experience that it says nothing about gender transitioning as a whole. Later on this page, he says, "I then began my research into gender reassignment surgeries in Bangkok, Thailand, an apt name for a city where I could have my penis removed. Bang and the cock was gone." All right, that's a pun, I'll give him that. "It would be reshaped and made into a woman's part, and I would be changed forever. I consulted with multiple doctors over video call, and it all sounded so easy and seamless, just as it always did. You come to Thailand, meet the doctor, and then they set the date for your surgery, and voila, you're officially a woman, albeit a plastic manufactured one, but still a real woman." Okay, it's kind of funny for him to say that it's so easy and seamless to get gender transition surgeries. Oh, it's so easy. There are no safeguards put in place for our kids. It's so easy that I, as a 28-year-old grown-ass adult, had to go to Thailand to find someone to do the surgery when I hadn't had any therapy beforehand. He's kind of refuting his own point here. Next, let's look at this sentence. He says, "I knew I could never be a real woman. Biology and chromosomes could not be changed." So it's weird that he talks about not considering himself a real woman even when he was trans. Like, maybe that was a sign that he wasn't really trans. But beyond that, what does he even mean by biology can never be changed? Biology is such a broad term for a category of many different things, many of which can be changed. Hormone levels and ratios of estrogen to testosterone, those can be changed. Genitals can be changed, as Ollie himself knows, since apparently he was looking into getting bottom surgery. Chromosomes aren't the be-all end-all of biology. For example, Ollie here is saying that in order to be a real woman, he'd have to have XX chromosomes. So does that mean that a woman who was assigned female at birth has had a vagina her entire life, etc.? Let's say she finds out in her 50s that she has some rare intersex condition that gives her XXY chromosomes instead, and she never knew. Does that mean that her entire life of being a real woman was a lie and now she's not allowed to go into the women's bathroom anymore? No one would know or even care about that. Second, how does Ollie even know that he doesn't have XX chromosomes? Some men, I mean, not even just trans men, men who were assigned male at birth, men who were born with a penis, the whole 9 yards, some of those men have found out later in life that they had XX chromosomes as well. And the fact that Ollie grew up dealing with gynecomastia means there's at least some chance that he did have some sort of intersex condition. Now again, I'm not a doctor. I can't say for sure whether he did or didn't, but it's absolutely possible. So just throwing around the word biology without any further exploration into the complexities of it, that's inaccurate and irresponsible. Further solidifying that this book is just meant to throw in as many cliche conservative talking points as possible for clout, on page 166, Ollie tells us the story of how he was going to go to Thailand to get breast implants, but instead, he chooses to go to church. And going to church is ultimately what saves him from his deviant ways. He says, "I was shunned and cast out, and yet the Christian community and the members of the church reached out to welcome me, helped me in my time of need, and helped push me forward through the light to become the man I am today. This is a message that I urge all Christians and non-Christians alike to follow. Rather than cast down and shun people who have extreme differences, such as the trans community or those confused with their identity, we should reach out to them and offer salvation, light, and support to navigate through their difficult journey and remind them that they are not alone in the world and that God can help them discover themselves again." So, Ollie, that's great that you had a nice experience at church, but that is not true for everyone. Many of the people that Ollie is pandering to, people like the Tucker Carlsons of the world, are out here using religion to discriminate against all types of LGBTQ people. Ollie himself does identify as LGBTQ, although which letter of that alphabet he identifies as varies based on the day and based on the interview and based on what he's saying. Like in the book, Ollie calls himself gay multiple times, explains how hard it was to accept his gay identity, how he used to pretend to impress women just because he was in denial about being gay, yet Ollie has also had relationships with women, and even in his appearance on the H3 podcast just a few months ago, which he did after he wrote this book, and where he plugged the book in the conversation, he talked about the fact that he considers himself bisexual and that he still dates women all the time. So what is Ollie exactly? I mean, the label doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he's a clout goblin. Everything he does is an act, so don't ever expect his view of himself to stay consistent. Regardless, if we treat Ollie's story as true, and we assume that he's telling the truth about being LGBTQ in some way, and he ultimately fails to acknowledge that any of the ways that churches have historically discriminated against same-gender couples, the ways they refer to homosexuality as a sin, all the church-run conversion therapy programs, all of that. He acts like the Christian church is the first place where he's ever felt accepted, and to be fair, maybe it is. For him. There are plenty of LGBTQ affirming Christian churches out there. I even have some friends who attend churches like that, but there are also still Christian pastors out there refusing to perform gay weddings, still religious communities calling being gay or bisexual or gender nonconforming in any way sinful. So it's possible that Ollie had a good experience himself, but once again, it's very strange of him to treat his unlikely experience as the universal one. But then on the next page, on page 167, we get more of his fun troll efforts. He says, "From the compassion and respect of the officer, Jesus was able to heal one of his servants from afar. This story demonstrates that with the modern phenomenon of celebrity and internet influencers, of which I had been labeled as one by the media, people tend to see them as an authority on issues or put their faith in them instead of the power of God. I had been doing this through my idol worship of Korean pop stars, particularly Jimin of BTS. I had wanted to be like them, and my relentless pursuit of achieving this had failed to recognize that I was funneling all my energy, all my passions and needs into a false idol." This is funny, right? Like, this is yet another nail in the coffin for Ollie just being a lifelong troll. The Bible tells us not to worship false idols. For example, K-pop idols. Like, that's funny. The dude's redemption tour is gonna be insane one day, I'm telling you. Like, is this book a grift? Yes. Yes, it is. More than that, I think it could even be part of an effort for Ollie to prime himself for some sort of spot on a reality show, maybe like something on TLC or Bravo or one of those type of channels. He's living his entire life as if he's playing a character, and in many ways he is. Right now, that character is right-wing talking head, but I highly doubt that's gonna last forever. When many conservative figures gain power, they tend to throw away their token LGBTQ supporters the second they get widespread support. So I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we move on to Ollie's next stage. What do you guys think it's gonna be? Let me know in the comments below. I think it could be something like adopting 500 children, maybe buying a zoo, doing a Tiger King kind of deal, maybe starting a pyramid scheme, recruiting some Mormon women into it, maybe inviting a ton of people to live in his house and filming a Kardashian-style reality show, maybe hosting his own spin-off of MTV True Life, maybe something else entirely that I can't even think of yet. Whatever it is, I think we can all agree is gonna be weird. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to check out the links in the description below. I'll see you guys again next week. In the meantime, keep on supporting small businesses. Bye!
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effing.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.